If you struggle with friendships, you're going to want to hear this. Broken friendships hurt. And for those of us who grew up with trauma, it is so painfully common that no matter how much we like a new friend, we live in fear that sooner or later one of us is going to ruin the whole thing. And it holds us back from trusting and from feeling close to people. So here's the part that's hard to figure out. Is it them or is it you? Because that's part of trauma too, to feel confused about when you're tolerating bad treatment from people versus when you're being the difficult one and you're pushing another good friend away. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Ashley, and she writes, "Hello, Anna. I'm having trouble with a pattern in my life of difficult relationships that I would love your input on." All right, I've got my fairy pencil. I'm going to go through. I'm going to read what Ashley is telling me and circle things I want to come back to on a second reading. So let's see what's going on in her life. She says, "I know that I grew up in a negligent and emotionally abusive family with substance abuse on the part of both parents who divorced when I was young. I have many examples of CPTSD behaviors in my past, such as promiscuity, alcohol abuse, being triggered, strong emotional responses to situations that don't warrant them, and so on. I've spent many years looking into and learning about myself and have made a lot of progress, and I also have more work to do. Aside from the generalized neglect and abuse of my parents, I also have always suspected some other trauma that I don't have a clear memory of. A lot of my behaviors are indicative of someone who has been abused in a worse way, if you know what I mean, although I have no memory of this. At this point in my life, age 53, I'm almost okay with not knowing the full story and instead focusing on the feeling of it and how it has affected my life. As a result of my background and a long history in my adult life of not understanding why I've made certain choices or why life felt so painful and defeating, I've often felt lonely and had difficulty forging healthy relationships, both romantic and with friends. I recognize that I have had a lot of people in my life that were not good friends or romantic partners and have come to understand this is a symptom of my hurt. I've allowed many people into my life without discernment, either because I was unaware of the unhealthy relationship dynamic or because I was afraid of being alone. Boy, you said it. Obviously, over time, these relationships fell apart. Here is my problem. My mother had a long history of allowing people into her life, enjoying and talking about her friendships with them, and then one day just foisting them aside, often for some trivial reason, from my point of view. I always felt that she just couldn't bear to get too close to anyone or deal with the challenges of being in a relationship with others, and so would come up with a, quote, good reason to push them away. Years ago, I had a friend tell me that she ended our relationship for this very reason. To her, I was inclined to push people away or dump friends, and she said she didn't want to be next. This surprised me and, of course, concerned me, and I've spent a long time looking at how that behavior might be at work in me as well. Here's the thing. The relationships that I could imagine she knew about and was referring to were, in my mind, good ones for me not to be in anymore. They involved poor boundaries, unkind dynamics, me playing small, mental illness, and so on. In other words, to me, they were very good examples of me crap-fitting myself to friendships that ultimately were not good for me. However, as I find myself at a crossroads once again, aching for just a couple friendships that are mutual, healthy, nurturing, I have this nagging feeling that my radar is not properly calibrated. Oh, that's very well put. I've gotten better at being more discriminating about who I let in, and I do think I have a capacity to accept the humanness of other people, as well as be realistic about the role they can play in my life. But I also wonder if I'm too hard on other people and too easily find reasons to not continue relationships with them. I will say that I'm on the cusp of this new way of being, and there are a couple of relationships that I have good questions about. But I don't know if I can trust my feelings that they are or aren't beneficial in my life. I have moments where I'm clear about it, but then others not so much. What do you think? And do you have a suggestion for how to feel more confident in the choices I make regarding who I let into my life and who I choose to keep at a distance? So I thought that was a beautiful letter. But then I wrote back to Ashley and asked her, I said, I like the question and I do get a sense of what's going on, but I think I need 2 or 3 brief but specific examples of friendships you ended, but you're not sure you should have. And she happily obliged. So she said, thank you for asking. And she said, well, she never told me which relationships were the one that offended the friend. You know, she didn't know which ones her friend knew about. And she had to imagine that she was talking about the following. So, number 1, I had a next door neighbor, she says, with bipolar disorder, who hid her mental health history from me. We became close friends, shared meals and childcare, and while I noticed inconsistencies in the stories that she told about her life, I chose to ignore them because I was lonely raising my 2 children by myself. Oh, that's the first we heard of the kids. Okay. And happy to have someone close by who was so available to me. I get it. When her symptoms began to flare up again, it was confusing and stressful for me, as there were incidents that involved my own children, and hers ended up in protective custody. Number 2, I had a friend from college who I always felt inferior to, and as though I served to make her look more put together. I didn't actually end the friendship. Rather, it faded as I tended less and less to play the role I always had, and when she moved away and got married. She was very upset with me for not making the expensive trip from my state to her state myself with my toddler son for her wedding. And after this, our friendship just faded away altogether. So I'm just going back. A friend from college who you always felt inferior to, and you felt that as though you served her to make her look more put together. Well, that's interesting. You had a sort of toxic thought there. Can't tell if it's true. But her anger at you not coming to the wedding. Okay. So then you said the relationship in question currently is the one that makes me ask the question. During COVID, I got a job for a friend who was underemployed at the small nonprofit that I ran for a wealthy, mentally ill woman. I knew the situation was unusual and hesitated to bring my friend on, but I was candid with her and thought it would be temporary. However, she ended up working there for almost 5 years, and in that time, I tried many times to explain to her the vagaries of working for this person who was not well, and she never really understood and instead fell into a relationship of triangulation with my employer and myself that was harmful to me when the employer decided she wanted me to leave the organization earlier this year. As a result, my friend allowed me to take the fall for numerous things she did that our employer didn't like, and she shared private information about my family after I had said that I was not sharing such information because I felt it could be used in ways that would be hurtful to me. It was. She was engaged in levying criticism against me along with our employer for things I do not feel were valid or even at times real. I think of this period as one where my employer was engaged in devaluing me and my friend participated in that process. Okay, that was a special situation there. We'll come back to that. And Ashley says, I actually don't think a lot of what she did is fully understood by her, even after she was also unceremoniously dismissed 6 months after I left. When I have tried to talk to her about it, she often seems confused by what I say or continues to try to explain the situation using a generous logic that does not apply to the behavior of the person we worked for. All of this has made me seriously question whether or not this is a friendship I would like to maintain. However, I also question whether or not my struggle is a result of having a faulty relationship meter, because I'm afraid to get too close to people, or because I have a tendency when things are difficult to spend an inordinate amount of time looking at what I may have done wrong and how I can fix it. And maybe it's all of these things and depends on the situation. I have difficulty discerning when I need to try harder with someone, let things be, and when I need to step back as the relationship dynamic is not healthy or has run its course. And that's from Ashley. Ashley, I just love your letter. It had a lot to it, and I decided to go ahead and read the whole thing because I think so many people can relate to the dilemma of being partially along the way on your healing from your past, which was hard, and still having friends that kind of match the old trauma or that's confusing. And you can't really tell, like, how much of it is you being unreasonable. I mean, that's like where we live so much of the time. it does get easier, and it gets easier because you face problems like this one, because you ask for a second opinion from a person like me, like, am I tripping about this? That is such a sane and healthy thing to do if it's somebody you trust. This first thing about your mom and her discarding of people, I don't know about that. You know, the trouble with people who aren't present and from the past and who aren't us, it's like we don't know. I could see how that could have been some sort of, you know, personality disorder behavior, or maybe it was something like what you're doing. But as you've described the friendships, they're each a little different, but I can see in each case why it didn't work out and why you would have wanted to distance yourself. And sometimes distancing ourselves is a good thing to do because it makes room for something better. It creates kind of an empty space for a while where we're figuring out, like, okay, what just happened? Is this a pattern for me? Was there something different about this? What did I bring to it? What part of my behavior contributed to this tension? And was there some way that I either held on too long or discarded too fast or jumped in blindly? And you know what? I think you kind of nailed it at one point in here. It's a little of all of that, which is so normal for people who grew up like without proper guidance and parenting. And it's so different. You know, it wasn't until I was a grown-up, and you have kids, so you know this. You have kids and you're just like, how on earth did my mom feel okay about just like running off and leaving us alone for days at a time? How did she do that? So you start to have perspective on like, well, gosh, no wonder I have such a hard time. No wonder I get very triggered when I feel like people are running off, right? And that's gotten easier because once you know, okay, I don't think you absolutely have to know what happened in the past, but we have to notice that, I don't know, I get a little bit, it's charged for me. It's a triggery situation. I can be very unrealistic in that situation, but all in all, you sound very reasonable to me. Hey, I've got a quick invite for you. I made a free daily practice course that shows you 2 simple techniques to calm the storm when you're triggered inside. It's short, it's powerful, and it helps you feel clearer, more focused, and more at ease, fast. Click the second link in the description section below, or use the QR code right there, and you can start your course right away. You said you felt lonely and you've had difficulty forging relationships. And yes, that's a big motivator to hold on and hang in there even when the writing's on the wall. Like, it's just not a great thing. So you've let people in without discernment, and the relationships then fall apart. So it's sad but true, but that's a lot of the journey for people like us who were neglected or abused as kids, is we have to go through this experience, and some people will be broken by it, and some of us, if we're lucky enough to have tools and support and just kind of an inner power to come through it and be able to visualize that we belong in a more stable and happy and loved place, we go forward. We go forward as you have. So I'm very proud of you and proud of everybody who's able to come through something like that. So there was your mom, and then you have a friend, and she ended her relationship with you for this reason, and she thought you just pushed people away and dumped friends, and she didn't want to be next. So I was a little fuzzy if she was the person in the third story, and I don't know, but either way, if she was or wasn't, did she maybe have shame or feel like, is she watching you kind of clear up a lot of your problems? I ask because I've had this experience. When you heal, when you start to transform your life, there's a lot of people who were good friends for you when you were in a different place. And it's almost like you had a little agreement to be screw-ups, you know, to not get what you want, to like never have a relationship and then complain about it and blame other people about it. Then when you change, either you're taking responsibility for changing your life so that you might have a relationship, or you actually get into one, that friend will often get very triggered by that. You've messed up the whole premise of their reality that causes them to think, did I do something? Do I have a role to play in this? And they might be in a place where they can't face that. And they're, you know, that's a fragile place, and we've all been there too. But healing happens when you can start to face and be like, because you can look at the great news. It's like, oh, wait, there's something that I did that contributed to this bad situation. That's so exciting to me because it means there's something that I can change. And so, you know, if I brought the problem, I can bring the solution. If somebody else brought the problem, chances are like this, that I can badger them or persuade them or threaten them into changing. I can't change them, and I definitely can't change stuff that happened in the past. I can't change that it happened. So it's not our fault what was done to us, but the sooner we can just sort of get into it's just reality. We're here now. We have our own behavior. We have our sort of the way that we see things to work with. And we can give ourselves good influences, good friends to be around, good books to read, good learning. Like, don't use all your downtime for just relaxing things. Like, sometimes do some learning things. And I've been talking lately about how helpful it is to me to read spiritual and philosophical books and ancient faiths to understand, but things that, I literally until I was about 40, I did think I invented a lot of principles about human nature. I'm laughing. I did. I thought that I had original thought about it. It's very hard to have original thought about human nature because for thousands of years, people have been figuring this out and writing it down and often living a monastic life so they could really, really focus on it and not be distracted by Netflix and relationships and whatever it was. So there's a lot that we can learn about basic principles of how to live and how to make a determination if somebody should be in your life. So some people get to be in our lives because we care about them and we want the best for them, and they may not be able to reciprocate what we're giving them, but we play that role. We're a pillar for them. Some people are in our lives because we have an obligation to them. They're, a parent or elderly relative. They're a child. They're a spouse. And so we show up for that person because we have a duty to do that. And some people are in our lives, even though we don't like them, because we were lonely, right? And I think that's a lot of, you had very good self-awareness, like, I sort of got into these relationships with people I didn't really approve of. And that doesn't mean you're bad. It just means you got into a relationship with people who they weren't at a level that was actually, that you felt good about having them in your life. The worst light you can put on it is you were using them for company. And I don't think that's the end of the world, but you can stop. If you're not feeling it, if you feel like somebody is not in that place where you would like them to be, you can stop. I understand what you mean, that a person can get into sort of an unhealthy thing where they just like get into people and then discard, get into them and discard. Most of us have known people who do that, and it's driven by something very much other than the characteristics of the person, except that if somebody is really manipulative like that towards other people, the people who sign up for it often are coming in with wounds of their own, like being lonely, where they will put up with it. And so a lot changes in terms of who gets through the door. If your life is a house, who gets through the door when you start being more healed? And part of our healing happens in relationships, which I trust it has in these relationships you described. These are healing relations. I'm really not into that sort of concept of like people who abuse you or your teacher or your mirror or anything. I think that's unhelpful woo-woo. But we learn from our mistakes and we start to learn the parameters of like how people operate and what is good to be with people and what makes a whole relationship stressful and hurtful. We start to learn, and we learn to be able to see it in advance. If we're awake to it, if we're alert, if we're not intoxicated all the time, that's a big thing that can get in the way. Or if we're not totally distracted in a big drama like a bad relationship, things like that. So when you described these friendships, we had the neighbor who ended up losing custody of her kids, and you pulled away from her. And I do understand that. And with your kids, you have like a very easy reason, because when you have children, you really have to pull away from people who could be dangerous or destructive for them. And that's very sad about her kids. And it's hard, isn't it, to be close to somebody who's going through that. But yep. The second one, the friend from college who you felt inferior to, and you were sort of fawning and serving them. And they got so mad at you because you wouldn't drive across country to their wedding with your child. And that's not really a good friendship. So maybe you were both just kind of using each other, right? And then the relationship in question currently, so I guess it's the friend who broke up with you. I think that's what you're saying. I wish I were clear about that. But during COVID, you let the friend in to this job. If it's that friend, I don't know. Oh gosh, if it's that friend, I don't know why you're too worried about it. It sounds really difficult. I'll tell you an unsolicited piece of advice. It's better not to bring friends into jobs. And it's also better not to work with nonprofits run by a wealthy, mentally ill person. Like, that's kind of the equivalent of hanging out with somebody you don't like because you're lonely. Taking a job like that is working for somebody because you need the money and for no other reason. That is crap fit. If you've heard me talk about that, it's when we fit ourselves, crap fit, we fit ourselves to something crappy, an unacceptable person or situation. And I don't know, perhaps I have past bias, but I have known people who were pretty mentally unhealthy, who had a pot of money and they were philanthropists, and people would flock around them and do their bidding to try to get a piece of that money. And it was some crazy stuff. It was pretty weird. And believe it or not, I used to have a startup and I needed funding. I had a educational technology for quickly making an online course using email. It was very cool. It's called Red Riding Hood. And I ended up not doing it because I didn't love it enough to work 80 hours a day like I do now. But I worked on that for a while with my husband, he was a software engineer at the time. We did this thing, and somebody gave us some money, some seed money, and we were obliged to go to these dinners, and the stuff this person would talk about at the dinner was shocking, offensive, uncomfortable, and we would go, because we had taken the money. And so that's a way, I had to be responsible, like I was using her, and the money was spent. I couldn't give it back, and the whole thing's over now. But I think money can drive people to money, and companionship and sex for that matter, and status can drive people to attach to others for the wrong reasons. And then people like us who are sort of vulnerable, who need all these things, we need the doors open for us a little bit so that we can get somewhere in the world. We need companionship and all these things. So we're vulnerable, though, and we're unclear how we would ever get those things in a healthier way. So something appears and we think, I'm never going to have anything else. And I'll be honest with you, like I've been very, very poor in the past. I've been worried, I've been like this far from homelessness, having to couch surf for long periods of time. I've lost my house. So, when you're afraid of money, it is pretty hard to be so principled. And some people are. And I don't blame anybody who has to, kind of dent their principles a little bit to get by, and especially for the sake of kids. Anyway, you're not in that situation now. You're in this like divine state where you're becoming aware of what the problem is. You're starting to make the changes. This is a very holy state, actually. You can almost imagine there's like this bubble around you of protection. If this bubble of protection has showed up to help you move forward in your life, honor the bubble, honor the protection by protecting yourself. And allow yourself to release these friendships that are no good for you. And just promise yourself that you'll actually do the research to find out what is a good relationship and participate in the things, whether it's therapy or 12-step groups. You can do it in my membership, where you're actually working on your ability to be close to people. You know what? This is a good opportunity to share with people for the first time. This is the galley-proof copy of my new book, Connectability. That's it. Heal the hidden ways you isolate, find your people, and feel at last like you belong. I've been thinking about this a lot because I've been living it all my life. And I finally made progress in being able to connect meaningfully with people. But part of connecting meaningfully with people is letting the right ones in. And sometimes it involves ending friendships with the people who don't fit. They just don't fit. When you do the work to get clear what your ideal life needs to be like, and not in like a big Cadillac pie in the sky way, but just like, what, I need to be with people I can trust, who get me, who are, who have my best interest at heart. That's what a friend is, by the way. A friend cares about your highest good and has gotten to know you over time enough to be able to meaningfully stand up for your highest good. We can't expect that from somebody we just met today, right? We'll do that too. Traumatized people, we're a little confused on the time required for these things, and we can get burned. So it takes time. We develop a friendship over time and test the waters and see. But if you feel that somebody doesn't have your best interest at heart, that's not a good feeling. And so I think the examples you gave me are very sensible, and whatever your friend is reacting to is her stuff. And in fact, if your friend is not supportive of you ending friendships that aren't good for you, I just think she's not your friend. She doesn't have your highest good in mind. You need to keep looking, though, at what is good, what is ideal, what is it that you really want. And by being very in touch with always, always kind of taking a step up, always being vigilant, always being willing to work at it, to educate yourself and learn, and become a little bit better all the time at showing up for relationships and being yourself and allowing yourself to make a few mistakes and tell the truth about how you feel about things gently, kindly. And when you make a mistake, apologizing. Your character can build up quite quickly. And when you have that, you can more confidently say, I know myself to be a person of good judgment. And with this person, I just don't feel good. Hey, it's me, and real fast, if you're watching my videos and wondering if maybe past trauma is having an effect on your life today, I want to share with you a list of signs that what you're struggling with now might be connected with neglect or abuse in your childhood. It's good to know this because it can help you know that what's hard for you right now is normal and that healing is possible. You can download my Signs of Childhood PTSD quiz by clicking the top link in the description section below or using that QR code right there. My quick litmus test of people is, how do I feel after I hang out with them? I have this friend I adore, we sing together, and every time we get together, I just feel lifted up and happy. And I have some other people in my life where every time I see them, I want it to be a good experience. I keep thinking it's going to be a good experience, but I'm just exhausted afterwards. I'm drained, I'm depressed, or I feel vaguely ashamed of myself. Do you know that feeling? So the vaguely ashamed feeling is sometimes just the way it is to have past trauma until you've healed. But when I feel that now, I'm like, I don't know, I'm not grooving with somebody. That's not going that well. So you're going to develop discernment. You already used the word discernment, which I loved in your letter, that you got into relationships without discernment. It's coming now. The discernment train has come to town. And here you are working on it. And this is how we do it, through trial and error, with friction, mistakes, setting boundaries, giving it a try, learning to be honest and considerate and kind, and learning, always learning, and trying to fulfill our greatest potential. So I wish you luck.